What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of a Pursuit. Brian Twining, NASCAR is back, and so are we. We're here with more NASCAR thoughts, betting thoughts heading into the season. We're going to make our Final Four predictions, and we'll talk about the Clash before we get out of here. All on this week's Angle of Pursuit.
Metcalf makes the catch. 10-5, touchdown.
Checkered flag in the air.
And he's going to house it.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
All right, Brian Twining, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm freaking so excited for NASCAR to get going. We got the Clash coming up this Sunday. And then in a little over 2 weeks, baby, NASCAR Super Bowl, the Daytona 500, the day that many people, including us last year, basically empty their bank accounts to go wild at the sports book, completely against all opinions and ideas of how you should bet NASCAR at super speedways. But there's no better fun than just going all in on the Daytona 500. And I'm excited to dive into what we're going to see this season and make our Final Four predictions so that way we can recap at the end of the year to see how wrong we were.
Over under 50% of your Final Four predictions make it in the Final Four.
I'm going to say under.
Yeah, that's probably the smart bet.
I mean,
my guess
honestly,
is between the two of us.
I push.
Yeah, between the two of us, I bet we get two of the drivers for sure. If we play our cards right, we get a third. And hopefully we have a little bit of differentiation so we can have some variety. Because if we had done this exercise going into last year, I guarantee neither of us would have had Ross Chastain in there.
No.
And probably not Christopher Bell, although we are big Christopher Bell stands on this podcast. So a few things before we dive in, just a couple reminders for those of you that have been disconnected from NASCAR maybe after the season and kind of diving back in at this point. Tyler Reddick is now part of 2311. He will be driving the car 45 that was previously driven by Kurt Busch. Pretty excited about his potential this year, Brian. We saw a big step forward from Reddick, especially on the road courses last year. And I think, spoiler alert, I think could be an interesting challenger for one of those Final Four spots.
Yeah, I think the addition of Reddick only propels 2311 into like that kind of middle tier, like getting towards that upper tier of ownership group. I mean, Bubba Wallace has been incredible at super speedways. We've seen that. We saw him do a lot better at 1.5s last year, winning at Kansas. We saw him do really good at road courses, surprising us, getting a couple of top 10s there. And then Reddick, it's interesting to see like what the money allocation and what just the devotion to the team is this year for him with 2311 as opposed to last year when he was already on his way out with RCR there. So I'm excited to see this team. I obviously love 2311. Bubba Wallace, probably my favorite driver. And then obviously coming from a traditional team sports background myself, like Michael Jordan was the king and he is the GOAT. LeBron James has nothing on him, by the way. Seeing him in the sport for another year going, like this is just awesome. And I'm really looking forward to see how much better or how they can improve going into this 2023 season.
Yeah, and I think one of the discussions we had a little bit on Twitter that I think I love our viewers to mention in the comments, 2311 versus Trackhouse. Who gets more wins in 2023? I think it's a serious debate. I think it's really fun. Obviously, Bubba and Suarez are pretty good competition. Obviously, Reddick and Ross Chastain could be interesting. So I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on who gets more wins in 2023. Kyle Busch in the Tyler Reddick's former team, number 8. It kind of breaks my brain a little bit when I see him in the racing suit. Like if it's not bright yellow or red or bright green, like I don't know how to process it. So that's been an interesting move. Obviously, AJ Allmendinger is with Colleague, and he is here for a full season in NASCAR, which we're both pumped, obviously, to see Dinger the Ringer. Ty Gibbs coming to NASCAR full time. replacing Kyle Busch. He will be number 54 this year. Welcome back, Ryan Preece, who will be taking our
Yeah,
good buddy
baby.
Cole Custer's seat. Noah Gragson, obviously, going to Legacy Motorsport, our Motor Club, number 42. Ty Dillon. I guess of the names that I just mentioned beyond Tyler Reddick, which one's most interesting to you? Because like obviously Kyle Busch is the big name and the legend, but are you in terms of what you may be interested in watching this year, maybe potentially betting? Do any of the other names potentially jump out to you?
Well, I mean, if you've been watching our videos for the last couple of years, as when we started doing NASCAR, one of the names that I'm excited to see back in the Cup Series is definitely Ryan Preece. I think jumping into that 41 SHR car, I think he's definitely a leveled up version of Cole Custer, who he popped a few times last year. I think Ryan Preece. I mean, not previewing the Daytona 500 too early here, but I think he's got a good shot to compete for, a finish inside the top quarter of the field for the Daytona 500, as he's traditionally been really well at super speedways. And I think that with SHR kind of going with the youth movement, I mean, you see like Kevin Harvick's going away, Almirola returning, but he's definitely stepping away at the end of this year, more than likely. I think that he's got a legit shot now to stick and be one of their drivers of the future. So I really think he's somebody who could, on a consistent basis, compete inside that teens, finishing positions for the whole year and be somebody that'll be on my card quite often for top 10 market.
Yeah, and I think he took strides in the Truck Series, and I think he's ready to come back and be legit. Like, obviously we're not going to vault him to the top among the elites, but could he be in the Michael McDowell range, in Chris Buescher range, in that kind of mid-pack guys that we tend to gravitate towards for the top 10s, for nice plays on DraftKings? I definitely think he can, and maybe he elevates beyond that, but at least for this season I think he's interesting. In terms of crew chief changes, there was a couple that were interesting. Alex Bowman has a new crew chief this year. He actually has Blake Harris, who was Michael McDowell's former crew chief. Austin Dillon has a new crew chief in Keith Roden, worked with Casey Kane and Jamie McMurray most famously, but that is interesting. And then obviously Michael McDowell has a new crew chief along with Ricky Stenhouse, Todd Gilliland, and Cody Ware. So it's always interesting to, obviously there's, you build a relationship and they know kind of how you like, do you need motivation on the track? Do you want to be left alone? You kind of build up a rapport. You can kind of communicate really well. So I'm really interested to see, especially with Gilliland, who I think, we've kind of wanted to see a step forward last year in his rookie season. Didn't really see it. McDowell, who obviously became someone each and every week. We were like, wow, this guy is really, like, he's not winning races, but he's super competitive. He's definitely in the conversation a lot more than I think either of us thought. And then obviously Alex Bowman, coming back from not only the concussion issues, but now as a new crew chief. How does that all play together? So I think, I guess only time will tell. Obviously, a lot of these guys are getting people with tremendous experience who have done this before, but how that relationship works and how, quickly they can get in sync and figure each other out, I think will be critical for their 2023 success, especially early.
I wanted to hit on the crew chief thing real fast. I think one of the most underappreciated non-crew chief moves coming into this 2023 season. We saw him come on strong late last year. You saw us bet him numerous times. Eric Jones, with them retaining his crew chief going into this season after we saw the strides that he made with then Petty GMS, now Legacy Motorsports. I think that we could see Eric Jones really take that next step and compete for a playoff spot, like a legit playoff contender this season, especially with what we saw out of him last year.
Yep. I think that is a great call. And I think that's a good segue into our Cup Series talk, Brian, because I think the playoff is going to be interesting. Obviously, only 4 drivers will make it there. So some big names are going to be on the outside looking in. And, we saw it last year, whether it was Kyle Larson just taking a huge step back and not really being the guy we saw 2 years ago. You know, Martin Truex taking a little bit of a step back. Obviously, Ross Chastain going from a mid to rear pack driver to a guy who ended up in the final four, and ended up being one of the most impressive, fun drivers. Obviously, the Melon Man. Oh, and speaking of that, Hail Melon has been outlawed for 2023, which, don't be sad because it's gone. Be happy that we got to experience it.
Exactly.
That was a hell of a ride. Obviously, that maybe something other than that will pop up, but that was a fun moment. Probably one of my favorite moments of the whole 2022 NASCAR season. But I think it's going to be a really interesting decision of who we want to actually consider for our final four. Obviously, Brian and I did make a couple picks back in, what was that, Brian? Like maybe a month ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's about a month ago.
So we do have a few outrights currently on the card. Tyler Reddick, as you can see, at 16-1. Chase Briscoe at 40. Christopher Bell at 12. Bubba at 40. And then Brian has 40 with Bubba, 60 with Keselowski, and then 50 with Cindric. A lot of those we're hoping to get better numbers, so we can kind of look at where we're at now. DraftKings does have some odds up, so I will pull that up here in a second. But we can look at odds checker and see what's on the grid. Chase Elliott is your favorite. Can you see that okay, Brian? Or can I make it a little bigger? Okay, cool. Let me see. Make this a little bigger. Oh, don't want to do that. There we go. Chase Elliott is your Cup Series favorite, along with Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin. Your defending champion, Joey Logano's right there. Ryan Blaney. Obviously, we went through a lot of these names. In terms of your final four, do you have, I guess, what was your thoughts in putting that together? Obviously, for me, I didn't want to go complete shock because we've seen like different names again. We've seen guys who won the Cup Championship the previous year not even make the final four. So I didn't want to be super chalky, but I also didn't want to like Ryan Preece, Michael McDowell, like Justin Haley. Like I didn't want to get crazy. So I guess where was your head at, and what kind of how did you narrow it down to your final four?
Honestly, I'm just looking at guys that can put together consistent runs at multiple different types of tracks. And then like either regression to the mean or like transgression to the mean. Like one of the guys, Ryan Blaney, I don't understand how that dude was probably the most unlucky driver that we've seen in a season for some time. I mean, to get out of that year without a single victory during a regular season race and still finish where he did in terms of like regular season points and just overall driver points was incredible. You're going to have some of the same names like Logano, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin. Elliott for me is probably, he's probably priced right as the favorite. I would not go back to Larson at 7-1. He has a little bit too much Ross Chastain in him for me to bet this far out. If we see him return to his dominant 2021 form, maybe like early in the season, but yeah, I don't know if I could get there, but like, I think like the two guys for me that will probably find themselves in my final four are good old Denny and Ryan Blaney. I think that both of those guys should return to kind of, dominant fashion at particular tracks going forward this season.
Okay. I like that call. One of those two names did make my final four. One of those two names did not make my final four. So I do have a short list of guys that are just on the outside looking in. And honestly, if you told me they were the final four, I would not be shocked in the slightest. Obviously, there's a lot of really talented drivers, and I think you could make the case for 10 or 12 names, and there's probably a name or two that hasn't really fully vaulted into that kind of next level that could be in that conversation. Austin Cindric could be one of those guys. So I guess before we dive in and reveal our final fours, who do you think could take a leap in 2023? Who is a driver, and obviously it doesn't have to be like kind of almost out of nowhere like Ross Chastain was last year. But like, who's a driver that you think is going to make a clear vault from maybe a back of the pack driver to a solid mid tier, very much like Michael McDowell last year? Or do you think somebody that is in kind of that mid tier that could take a vault and jump into, I'm contending for, one of those last few playoff spots. I'm in that, Austin Dillon, Martin Truex, Ryan Blaney kind of area of last year?
Well, I mean, the first name that comes to mind for me is kind of a blast from the past, and that's definitely AJ Allmendinger jumping into a full-time ride with Colleague.
Yeah.
He's been the ringer, Dinger the ringer for a reason at road courses.
Yep.
Now that he's jumping into a full-time ride, he actually has a decent amount of success at Daytona in the past. So I think that there's a good possibility that he could sneak one of these super speedways in there. I think getting him over the entirety of the season, I think he's going to be a upper mid level runner on a consistent basis, crack that top 10 pretty frequently, maybe, double digit times this year, and potentially win one or two of those road courses. So I think Dinger is somebody that's going to pop into the playoffs this year and could make some noise, especially, if Colleague is serious about putting forth the effort with these guys, as opposed to last year, mind you, where they were continuously rotating guys at different tracks. Like, I think they take a leap in terms of an overall team as well, in terms of their success.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good call. I think Colleague last year had eyes for having a full-time driver. I think they wanted those guys to prove who should get that seat. And I think Dinger definitely did that. I remember talking about him, especially after the All-Star break last year, about how he kept kind of like top 10ing, top 12 conversation at like 1.5 2-mile tracks that he typically didn't do very well at. So it was really nice to see him take a step forward, earn that full-time ride. And I think that's a great call. Obviously, you mentioned it when we were talking a little bit before, but Eric Jones makes sense as a guy who could be evolving from a super speedway maven to a guy who could be more of a week to week factor. As we get into our final four, Tyler Reddick is that guy for me. Yep. I think he is a legitimate, like, obviously he's been a really talented driver, a guy who made strides, a guy that was obviously in the playoff conversation, but I think he is like championship contender Tyler this year. Obviously his odds are not like super long. He's 12-1 in the William Byron, Ross Chastain. Like, it's not a stretch to see him, but I think he is closer to the Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott's side of the thing, and will be one of my 4 playoff drivers in 2023, or my final 4.
I cannot argue with that at all. And I was actually thinking about,
I mean, just the strides he made at road courses to go along with what he can do at your 1 mile, 1.5 mile, 2-mile tracks. I just think, we need, like you said, you want a guy who can consistently be in the conversation no matter where the race is happening.
Exactly.
And he was a guy, and obviously it's a little concerning with him switching teams. How does that all come together in 2023 in the 2311 car? But we saw what the 45 could do. We saw how impressive, Kurt Busch won. That car was getting to a good place. Bubba obviously jumped in it last year for a little while. So it'll be interesting to see if Tyler Reddick can get in there, obviously get his phone books to sit on it so we could see over the steering wheel. And then, and then get that car in the victory lane. Maybe a couple times.
Yeah, honestly, I said this at the top of the show. Like, I really think 2311 is going to make a lot of noise this year. And as soon as we get these damn manufacturer props for win totals and all that stuff, like, I'm hoping that number is posted at 3.5, because I'm going to smash the over, thinking that we get multiple wins from both him and Bubba Wallace this year.
I'm hoping we can get like a 2 or 2.5, but maybe that's
I think
that's not realistic.
I think they're going to set some lofty goals for Tyler Reddick. Probably, I mean, I really do think that there's something to be said about him jumping to a team that is a little more focused on, like, their attention is a little more focused on a smaller amount of drivers, whereas driving with RCR, yes, that team-wise, they were, they only had a couple of guys, but in terms of like the manufacturer with Ford, they sponsor, like they're the car for a ton of other teams, whereas Toyota is only in two garages right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to play really well for him.
And I think with RCR especially, like that relationship got a little weird at the end.
Yeah,
and I think that caused a little bit of,
that bridge got burned quick.
Yeah. Okay, so that is my first driver in. Who is your first driver in your Final Four?
Okay, the first guy, Ryan Blaney. Like I said, I'm gonna bet him until he freaking wins a damn regular season race. Okay, so because it's happening.
Over under 3.5 months before Ryan Blaney gets his first win. I did appreciate last year that you bet him, I think, almost every single race except for the All-Star race, and I bet him on the All-Star race, and he wins the All-Star race. So yeah. So he was my toughest omission. He was so damn good last year. Obviously didn't get the win, so wasn't able to kind of sneak in at the end. But yeah, he was really tough for me. I really, he is among those. So I have my Final Four, and then I have 4 names in my outside looking in column that I think, like I said, if you put these 4 names as your playoff 4, I would not be shocked in the least. So my next guy, Chase Elliott. I just think he is so damn consistent. The best driver week to week, can thrive on any course.
He's a cheater.
Can literally win any race. And just every week shows up and is among your betting favorites. Could he have a Kyle Larson season? Sure, I guess, because we didn't think Larson was doing that, but he's been so consistent for so long, and he's really coming into his own. Winning Atlanta was huge for him last year. I don't see any way he's not in the Final Four.
Yeah, and we talked about that the first NASCAR show that we did for this new season. Like, honestly, Chase Elliott he should be the favorite at every sports book, just because like he is so strong at so many different types of tracks that I don't see him having, too many hiccups in the playoffs. Like, very similar to what happened to Kevin Harvick last year when the playoffs began, when he had 2 consecutive DNFs. Yeah. I honestly don't see Chase Elliott being put in that situation. And even if he is, like, he's good enough to go do the Christopher Bell win and get in style for the playoffs.
100%. All right, what's the second name?
I'm gonna go Denny Hamlin. He's too consistent at too many tracks for me, and I think Toyota as a whole, outside of Christopher Bell, who needed those Hail Mary victories to keep advancing in the playoffs, I think Denny Hamlin and Toyota in general makes a huge recovery this season, and he's right back there into the Elite 8, and then getting into that Final Four for the championship race in Phoenix.
Yep, he's also in my Final Four. He's really good. He is, like, I think, if that Ross Chastain move didn't work or he didn't try it, then he would have made the Final Four. So like there's a reason why, he was right there, and then he just missed it. So Hamlin is in my Final Four as well. He's so fast, he's so strong, he's so consistent no matter what kind of racetrack you put him on. So he is my third driver. Who is your third driver?
So I'm gonna continue with the trend of guys that I really like, but I'm going Willie B here. I think Byron, who had quite possibly like the most polarizing season in terms of finishing positions that we've seen from a guy for the last couple of years. I mean, he was either finishing inside the top 5 or he was finishing outside the top 20. That was kind of the way his year went. But I think his car is too good. He's shown it numerous occasions that he can run up front. There was a few times where he just got caught up in the accidents. I think he rebounds this year. I think he's the Hendrick guy that makes some noise late in the season. And mainly just for argument's sake, I am not including Chase Elliott, and instead I'm going to go with Byron, who I actually, I like him better as a fan, but I think Byron recovers and has a much better season.
Well, I'm going to go with a Hendrick driver for my Final Four, a guy that I think is going to recover and have a
Alex
great
Bowman.
season. Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson is going to, I think obviously 2 years ago wasn't a realistic outcome, but also last year isn't really who he is either. I think they figured some stuff out. Down the stretch, he got a lot better. He was a lot more competitive. He was winning races, and obviously just wasn't enough to get him all the way to the Final Four. But he had some issues. He had some problems finishing races. I guess my only question is he is interested in driving other types of cars. Is he a little, I don't want to say he's going to get distracted or whatever, but that I guess that would be my only hesitation. But yeah, Kyle Larson is in my Final Four. So as a recap, I have Chase Elliott, I have Tyler Reddick, I have Kyle Larson, and I have Denny Hamlin in my Final Four. Brian, who is your fourth and final driver?
Well, I mean, again, I'm getting a little risky here, but I think that how I said it at the early stages of the show, SHR, they're going with the youth movement here, and I'm going to go with the guy who we almost had the chance to root for a 50-1 outright championship, and I'm going to put Chase Briscoe in there. I think you saw it at the end of the season. This guy was incredible during the last few races. He had top 10s in 4 of the last 5 events. He had top 5s in 2 of the last 4. I think Briscoe is good enough to really elevate his driving as we get into like his 3rd year in the Cup Series. And like I said, I think more time and attention is going to go towards him as now the premier driver for that brand, even though it's Harvick's retirement time. But normally when that happens, like those guys are probably going to take a little step back because the team is not focused on trying to get them, for the future. So I really think that Briscoe is now the guy in that garage, and I think he makes some noise this year.
I love that call. He could easily be one of the guys that takes a leap in 2023. He obviously won the race in what did he win? He won California?
Yeah, I think he won.
Yeah, so he's obviously
Phoenix.
a guy.
He won the first Phoenix race. So
yeah, the first Phoenix race. That's right. Yeah, so he had a fun season last year. Obviously, we did have those nice long tickets, hoping he could squeeze in on the last day, and he was ever so close, but did not get in there. But yeah, I think that's a very good call, and probably one that not a lot of people are really considering, just because there's so many good names.
And then also too, before we get to your last guy, I think there's something that also is important here is that we're looking at these numbers from opening season. And I think Briscoe is a guy who, once the season starts going along, he's going to be more recognized as a legit contender. So these odds are definitely going to shrink for him.
Yeah, I feel like he could be Ross Chastain of this year for sure. So recap your Final Four for everybody.
So I'm going to go Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, William Byron, and Chase Briscoe.
Spicy. I like it a lot. I was worried there'd be a little too much crossover. The 4 names that I wanted to consider that I just could not get in: Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, the defending champion, as much as you hate him, Ross Chastain, and Christopher Bell. Those are like the 4 names that would be my next 4. If we did an Elite 8, I think that would be my 8.
Well, and I think too, on that note, like we said, I love Christopher Bell. Like we said, this is a Christopher Bell fan podcast, but the fact that it took him winning, he needed wins in races to advance in the playoffs. The likelihood of that kind of stuff happening again, even though he should get maybe a little bit better coming into this year, now that he's like moved up a ring in terms of like the hierarchy for JGR, he's probably like 2nd, maybe even 1st going forward with Denny's contract coming up here soon. But there's too much volatility there. And then, I mean, king of volatility, Ross Chastain. You don't know what he's going to try to pull off to win races.
King of volatility could be William Byron too. So,
but
yeah, no, I think that's a good call, and I think that's interesting. Like, I think Bell, I think Byron, I think Ross, like those guys could be guys that pop up week to week. I think the odds of Christopher Bell being more consistent and still able to win races versus, a Denny or Ryan Blaney winning a few more races after being so consistent all year is like, it's much more likely that a Blaney or Denny take it a step forward than maybe Bell does week to week. So with that being said, Brian, who underwhelms in 2023? Obviously, Kyle Larson was that guy last year. Who was a guy that maybe people are excited about, maybe is higher on the odds board, and for one reason or another is just a little frustrating, a little underwhelming, doesn't win quite as many races, maybe still makes the playoff, but is kind of like one of the last 4 or 5 cars in.
I mean, I gotta go with Logano. He very similarly, he pops at certain tracks, but last year he was all over the place in terms of finishing positions. Especially coming off of a championship, you see it in every other sport known to man. Like, there is a championship hangover that is legit. And Kyle and I were chatting before we started recording, and Kyle was mentioning that Logano didn't make the Final Four the year after he won his last championship. So like, I'm banking on that trend to continue here. And I also think that just with the guys that I think are going to bounce back, I think that's going to push Joey Logano out of that conversation because of that.
Yeah, I think Logano's in the conversation. I think Kyle Busch switching teams, like, that could be
What's interesting about Kyle Busch is a lot of people are really high on him this year because, like, maybe revenge factor or what, but like, I know the new car is supposed to make things even, but
I feel like he's either going to be amazing and like dominant, or he's going to be really frustrating each week. I don't think there's just a middle of the road season for Kyle Busch, but I could be wrong. I mean, I guess Tyler Reddick could be that guy. Everybody's excited about him, thinks he takes the leap. Chris Bell could be that guy where everybody's excited about him, thinks he takes the leap, and kind of falls back a little bit. I think those are the names.
There's not a lot at the top. Like, I mean, even though I said like Kyle Larson, I think he can disappoint in terms of where he is on the odds board, but what does that mean? He makes it to the round of 8 and barely misses out, getting to the round of 4. Like, and then the same thing with Chase Elliott. I find it almost unimaginable that he's not in at least the round of 8 for the playoffs. Like, he's too good of a driver for that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, we're not saying any of these drivers stink or they're going to have bad years. They're just, there's only 4 spots, so you have to vault, so you have to kick somebody out. So let's take a quick look at the updated Daytona odds to see if there's anything spicy to take a look at. Obviously, in 2 weeks will have our full Daytona preview. We'll do our betting preview. For those that are new to the show, we do Wednesdays, we record, so in your feed on Thursday morning, full betting preview, and then we'll record on Saturday, or what do we record, Saturday?
I think Saturdays.
Saturdays. Yeah, after qualifying we record.
Yes, post qualifying.
And then it's in your feed early Sunday morning. Obviously,
and that comes with DFS, DK
Friday, and that's all of our DraftKings thoughts as well as any updated betting thoughts post qualifying. So get on. Make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you are that way you get our videos as soon as they hit the feed. But I did want to refresh through the numbers to see if there's anything interesting. Obviously, there are some quality drivers and they're all kind of mushed together, and picking a winner from up here might be a little challenging. Brian and I like to kind of dive down the betting board and see if we can't find value. I think Bubba
especially too, you have to mention, like, if anybody is like new to NASCAR betting, which we definitely experienced 2 years ago, and obviously I led off with this, like, we're probably going to shotgun the board, which is not advised for a super speedway race.
Okay, so this is if you want to have fun and you want to have a bunch of bullets, throw a few bucks on everybody.
Exactly.
If you're trying to be a consistent winner, betting super speedways is not the way to do it.
No.
Maybe you could find some value in the top 10 market and hit a couple names there. But super speedways offer the most wide range of outcomes. If you want consistency, there's going to be a lot of opportunities where there's going to be a handful of names that we really want to focus on.
Yeah.
But the super speedway is a fun way to get started, fun way to jump in. and potentially, fire some bullets. So Bubba is a guy that pops at super speedways, always really fun. 16, 18 to 1 is fine number on him. If you want to bet any of these elite guys, go for it. I don't think Brian and I will be adding any to the card. Christopher Bell, we like him. We're going to bet him a lot. 28 to 1 is a really nice number.
I think the guy right below him, Austin Dillon, too, who performs really well at super speedways, 30 to 1. If you could grab that, is a great number.
Eric Jones, 33, a guy that excels at super speedways or super speedway like courses, Michigan, Atlanta, both does really well there. So he's a guy that I really like to target here.
It's terrifying that Ricky Stenhouse is 30 to 1. I don't like.
What do we make of him? Last year was, especially at the end of the season, was an absolute nightmare. Obviously got married, so maybe things have settled a little bit. I don't really know. Like he had a lot going on, I'm guessing. I don't know, but that end of the run was just an absolute train wreck. He was constantly breaking. I honestly I really like him, especially at speedways. But I won't be doing that until I see a little more consistency from him.
Yeah, he's a guy who we both like to target on these types of races, but the fact that he was literally his car was all over the place at numerous tracks last year, it's hard to go back to the window with him anywhere for that matter.
Yep. Your boy Ryan Preece was as long as 40 to 1. I think that's a nice number. If you can get him, I think if you can get him 35 or better, once you get into that 30 range, I think there's better options with guys that have done it better, including Eric Jones. But I think 35, 40, I think is a really good number, and I really like especially for super speedway races, kind of grabbing a couple guys from this range and seeing if I can find myself a winner.
I think the last two Daytona 500 winners all came from the 30 to 40 to 1 range.
Yeah. Justin Haley last year, I believe, he was the guy that got
everybody was on him.
Everybody was on him, and his number ended up being 30 or 35 when it opened, I think at 80, as long as 80 at 70 or 80. So
yeah,
didn't have the race everybody wanted. This might be the year to buy in. You can get a 50 on him. I think that's a great number. I think 40 is fine. Grabbing a couple guys in this range. Noah Gragson, second full season, I think could be interesting. I think he's ready.
So a guy that will be on my card, AJ Allmendinger at 50 to 1. I believe that's over at Caesars. If you can get that juice on a guy who I believe, when I was looking at his data and just going back throughout his history, 3 of his last 4 runs at Daytona, mind you, these were all prior to 2018, he finished inside the top 10. So I think, like I said, coming into this season, knowing he's got a full-time ride colleague, not messing around with different drivers, I think in terms of the type of race that this is, he could compete in this for a potential win at 50 to 1.
Corey LaJoie is a long shot. Sure. Let's throw $5 on it and see what happens. Outside of him in this range, I want no piece of any of these names. If you want to bet Jimmy Johnson for old time's sake, but look at that number. That's too short for a guy who hasn't as good as he was.
And he's driving the second tier car for that brand too. He's driving 5 races this year. So, I mean, dude has the experience out the wahoo, but.
Yeah, but even if you put Kyle Larson or Chase Elliott in these cars, it's not what they're used to driving. So I don't know. That seems it's for shits and giggles. Sure, throw $5 on it if you want to.
Well, and they know that people are going to attack.
Yep, that's why
Jimmy
they put
Johnson.
the number. It's just
I think it'll be interesting if Austin Hill can get one of the open spots for the Daytona 500. I think he's somebody to look at in terms of potential placements. Because he's incredible at super speedways in Xfinity Series.
And we'll have to see. Maybe DK will bring back the top 20s, maybe even if it's just for Daytona.
No way.
That could be fun. Okay, let's hit the Busch Classic really quick, and then we'll get out of here. So just wanted to bring it up for the people that might not know how it works. It's a lot like the All-Star race last year. They're going to qualify 1 through 40. Then they're going to be set up into heats of 4. They're going to the fastest qualifier gets the pole for heat 1, then heat pole for heat 2 all the way down. And then they'll race. They'll get a few spots, so you can see the heat winners all get spots. Heat second place gets it. Third place, fourth place, all done fifth, and they'll do a last chance 50 laps for 2 races, and they'll put those people in to qualify for the 27 spots. They expanded the field a little bit this year for 150 laps for the Clash. So that is how it will work. These are the odds. Obviously, these are this is a race that is kind of wild and not necessarily easy to predict. We don't have a lot of loop data. We don't have a lot of history. There's a chance that if you don't perform well in your heats, that you just don't even end up in the race. So it is a little bit interesting, but it could be a fun race if you want to just have a little action. And there's no football this weekend. Go nuts! But I don't think Brian and I will be putting down big boy stacks on any of these options.
No.
The one thing I will say, in terms of last year's race and kind of what went well, what did not go well, Kyle Busch was the best driver in terms of driver rating, with Logano right behind him, and then Kyle Larson, and then Justin Haley. Starting near the front does not necessarily mean you're gonna have a really good chance at winning, but
I was gonna say passing is difficult.
Logano started 4th, yeah. Kyle Busch started 1st, and Logano won. Kyle Busch was 2nd. Eric Jones actually started 16th and finished 4th. Austin Dillon started 10th and finished 3rd. Larson started at 8th and finished 5th. So you do kind of want to be near the front. Cole Custer started 14th, got to 7th. Obviously Ryan Preece will be in his ride this year, so something to think about. So just a quick run through the numbers, see if anything really jumps out. It's very Daytona in terms of the betting odds, very, very short, very clumped together. Obviously, the elites are elite for a reason. Kyle Busch is kind of interesting, especially if you can get that 10-1 over at points bet. Denny is always a good shot. Let's load the rest of these. Tyler Reddick at 16 is kind of fun. Anyone jumping out to you as that could be a nice value?
I don't mind right there. Chase Briscoe, 33-1.
Yeah,
I mean, it's an
fun.
extreme short track. He performed well at both Phoenix races. I think he's somebody who is not opposed to beating and banging, which we saw numerous times last year. I mean, literally trying to move people to win races and such. So I think he's a guy who could really place himself in, the limelight this Sunday. Like I'm hoping, which is why I'm picking him for my Final Four.
Chris Buescher's there. He's really interesting. We haven't really talked a lot about him today, but he was a name you'll hear early and often on the show. Obviously, Eric Jones made up some nice ground. Could make sense at 50-1. Like, this could be a fun race where you get like a few of the guys in like the 40 to 60 range and just, hope to hit a lottery ticket. I think Priest makes sense. I think Eric Jones makes sense. I think Buescher makes sense. Allmendinger at 75, as long as 75, that's kind of fun. Take a few shots and see what pops out. Brian Twining, it was good to be back. It was fun to talk NASCAR. Our plan as of now next week is to have, hopefully we get some groups and some season-long props that we can review, go over, make some season-long bets. If not, we'll try and figure out something for NASCAR. Obviously, we'll have our Super Bowl betting preview. So if you've been following along with the football season, that will be there. And then we'll be back for Daytona, hopefully with a special guest. Hopefully we'll have a few special guests throughout the season, and we can make some bets. We'll obviously twice a week betting on Thursday.
DK and betting.
DFS and final bets on Sunday morning. Those will be in your feed, so make sure you are subscribed. And let us know down in the comments, once again, Team Trackhouse or Team 2311, who will have more wins in 2023. I think 2311 in 2023 makes a little sense, but I love Ross Chastain. So that is Brian Twining. I am Kyle Robert. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next time.